The hologram showed a man being torn apart by something that looked like a walking tree. Danny Reeves watched the footage without blinking. Around him, the other new arrivals shifted in their seats, some looking away, one making a sound like he might be sick. But Danny leaned forward, studying every frame. "This is why we have protocols," Supervisor Macaulay said. The four-armed Brevian stood at the front of the briefing room, his gray skin stretched tight over his skull. Verdant 7 is rich in minerals. It is also home to the Thornfolk. They're not friendly. They're not curious. They are killers. He changed the hologram. Another death. Another survey team member dragged into the green darkness of the forest below. In 40 years of operation, we have lost 63 personnel to the natives. Every single one made the same mistake. They entered the forest. Danny raised his hand. Macaulay's four eyes focused on him with clear annoyance. "What did they do before the attacks?" Danny asked. "Excuse me," in the footage. "What were the teams doing right before the Thornfolk attacked?" Macaulay's mandibles clicked. They were doing their jobs. Surveying. Sampling. The natives did not care. They attack anything that enters their territory. Danny nodded, but something bothered him. In the footage, the survey teams had not just been walking. They had been cutting, drilling, taking samples from trees and soil. The attacks came after, not before. T kept this thought to himself. After the briefing, a thin creature with feathered limbs approached him. This was Pelori, the veteran scout who had survived longer on Verdant 7 than anyone else. "You are the geologist," Pelori said. His voice was soft, almost musical. "You will work the eastern cliffs. Good minerals there. Safe distance from the tree line." "How far is safe?" 300 meters minimum. "The Thornfolk do not leave their forest. Stay on the rocks, stay alive." Pelori tilted his head, studying Danny with bird-like eyes. "You asked a strange question in the briefing. I noticed a pattern. Many have noticed patterns. They went to confirm their theories. They did not return." Pelori placed a feathered hand on Danny's shoulder. "Be smart, human. Curiosity is valuable, but not more valuable than your life." Danny spent his first week learning the operation. The survey station floated in orbit above Verdant 7, but the work happened on the planet's surface. Shuttle rides down, long days of drilling and sampling on the cliff faces. Shuttle rides back up. The eastern cliffs held rich deposits of rare minerals that the Galactic Survey wanted badly. The forest spread beneath the cliffs like an ocean of green. Sometimes Danny would stop his work and just look at it. The trees were massive, their canopies so thick that no light reached the ground. Somewhere in that darkness lived the Thornfolk. At night, in his small quarters, Danny reviewed the old survey reports. He was looking for something specific, and on his 9th night, he found it. Every single attack had a trigger. Team 7 had been drilling near a root system when the Thornfolk emerged. Team 12 had been cutting branches for samples. Team 23 had dumped wastewater near the tree line before the attack. It was never random. The Thornfolk were not hunting outsiders for sport. They were protecting something. Danny brought his findings to Pelori. The old scout listened without interrupting. When Danny finished, Pelori was quiet for a long moment. "You may be right," he finally said, "but it changes nothing. The company wants minerals. The minerals are in the forest. The forest belongs to the Thornfolk. There is no future where everyone wins." "What if there is?" Pelori made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Then you are smarter than 40 years of survey teams combined. I hope you are, but I do not believe it." That night, Danny stood at his window and looked down at the planet below. The forest was invisible in the darkness, but he knew it was there. Waiting, watching. He thought about the Thornfolk. In the footage, they had moved with purpose, not rage. They had protected their home the only way they knew how. Every survey team had seen them as monsters. But monsters did not show patterns. Monsters did not respond to specific triggers. The Thornfolk were people. Alien people, but people nonetheless. And nobody had ever tried to understand them. Danny made a decision that night. He did not know how or when, but someday he would find a way to prove his theory. He would show the galaxy that the Thornfolk were not killers. They were defenders, and defenders could become friends He fell asleep with the green world filling his dreams, not knowing that the universe would soon force his hand in ways he never expected. The evaluation chamber stretched half a kilometer in every direction. Floating drones filled the air, each one carrying sensors designed to measure every possible metric of predator performance. Bite force, reaction time, sensory range, killing efficiency. Shira sat in the middle of the chamber, cleaning her paw. The lead evaluator, a Valoran named Tessic, studied his instruments with growing frustration. The readings must be wrong. Run the calibration sequence again. We have run it 4 times, his assistant said. The numbers are accurate. Tessic looked at the holographic display, showing Shira's baseline metrics. Her bite force was impressive by primitive standards, but fell far short of engineered maximums. Her speed was adequate. Her sensory capabilities were merely biological. This creature is unremarkable, Tessic announced to the observation gallery, where delegates from across the galaxy had gathered to watch. Its physical specifications fall within standard parameters for an unmodified carbon-based predator. I fail to see why humanity believes this qualifies for the Apex Conclave. In the gallery, Dr. Amara Okonkwo said nothing. She simply watched. We will proceed with the behavioral assessment, Tessic continued. Release the evaluation drones. A dozen small machines emerged from the chamber walls. They were designed to approach Apex companions from multiple angles, testing reaction times and threat response. Simple programming. Predictable patterns. The drones moved toward Shira in a standard formation. The tiger did not react. Subject shows no response to approaching stimuli, Tessic noted. Possibly defective sensory systems or Shira moved. She did not move toward the drones. She moved to a position 3 meters to her left and slightly forward. Then she sat down again. The drones continued their approach toward her original position. 3 seconds later, they initiated their programmed threat simulation. Small electrical charges designed to test pain response. They shocked empty air. Tessic stared at his instruments. How did it know? The drones had not initiated their attack sequence. There was no signal for the creature to detect. In the gallery, Crixtal leaned forward. She had been watching closely. Play that back. Slow it down. The holographic display rewound. Frame by frame, they watched the tiger's eyes. She had been tracking the drones since they emerged. Not their positions, their intent. She read their approach vectors, Crixtal said slowly. She calculated where they would be and moved before they arrived. That is not reaction. That is prediction. Impossible, Tessic said. Prediction requires processing of threat data. This creature has no neural enhancement, no computational. She does not need computation, Amara said from the gallery. Her voice was calm. She has instinct. Millions of years of hunting prey that was also trying to survive. Her ancestors learned to read the future in the movement of their targets. The ones who could not predict died. Shira is descended from the ones who could. The evaluation continued. More drones. More tests. Each time, Shira responded to threats before they fully developed. She did not process information. She felt it. Then came the hunting simulation that a holographic prey animal materialized in the chamber. It was designed to test pursuit behavior. Standard metrics. Chase speed, stamina, cornering ability. The other Apex companions at the summit had attacked immediately. The swarm hunter flooded the chamber in seconds. The razorwing struck within milliseconds of prey detection. The depth crusher lunged with enough force to crack the simulation floor. Shira did nothing. The prey animal moved through the chamber. Running. Stopping. Running again. Classic evasion patterns. Shira watched. Minutes passed. The delegates in the gallery grew restless. High Arbiter Thesson smiled. It appears your natural predator lacks the basic hunting drive. Perhaps 4 billion years of evolution produced something rather disappointing after. The tiger moved. IKT happened so fast that the recording systems struggled to capture it. One moment Shira was motionless. The next, she was on the other side of the chamber with the holographic prey pinned beneath her. She had not chased it. She had waited at the exact point where the prey would eventually run. 20 minutes of patience, and the kill took less than a second. The chamber fell silent. Crixtal approached Dr. Okonkwo after the evaluation ended. Her compound eyes held something that might have been respect. Your beast. It was not waiting for the optimal moment. No, Amara agreed. It was waiting for the prey to believe it was safe. Yes. Crixtal's mandibles clicked softly. On my world, we spent 3 centuries engineering the Razor Wing. We gave it every advantage science could provide. Speed, armor, weapons. We made it impossible to escape. She looked at Shira, who had returned to cleaning her paws, as if the entire demonstration had been a minor interruption. Your Earth, Crixtal continued, made something different, something that does not need to be inescapable. Because by the time the prey knows it is being hunted, the hunt is already over. Amara smiled. Now you understand. No, Crixtal said. I do not understand at all. And that is what frightens me. In the observation gallery, High Arbiter Thassan was reviewing the evaluation footage. His face had lost its earlier smugness. He watched the tiger wait, and wait, and wait. Then he watched it kill. He made a note on his datapad. It said only one word, dangerous. Flowers made of light filled the darkness. Danny woke in a place that should not exist. The trees here had been shaped, bent, and grown into structures that served as walls and ceilings. Bioluminescent blooms hung everywhere, casting soft blue and green light across a living settlement. His leg was wrapped in something cool and wet. Plant matter of some kind, packed around his injury. The pain had faded to a dull ache. Whatever they had used, it worked better than anything in the station's medical kit. He was lying on a bed of soft moss inside one of the tree structures. Through the opening, he could see thorn folk moving through the settlement. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. This was their home, and they had brought him here alive. A smaller thorn folk entered the structure. It was shorter than the others, its bark smoother, its thorns less developed. A young one, Danny realized. A child. The young thorn folk stopped a few meters away and stared at Danny with bright amber eyes. Its bark shifted colors slightly, from brown to green to something almost yellow. Danny stayed still. He kept his hands visible. He tried to make his body language as non-threatening as possible. The young one crept closer. It reached out with one small hand and touched Danny's arm. The skin-to-bar contact lasted only a moment before the creature pulled back, its colors shifting rapidly. Curious, Danny thought. It was curious about him. He smiled. The young thornfolk tilted its head, clearly confused by the expression. Danny pointed to himself and said his name slowly. Then he pointed to the young one and raised his eyebrows. The creature made a soft sound like wind through leaves. Danny tried to repeat it. The young one's colors shifted to something brighter, almost playful. Over the next 2 days, Danny learned. The young thornfolk, which he came to think of as Sprout, visited him often. Through gesture and patience, Danny began to understand the basics of their communication. Colors meant emotions. Sounds meant specific things. Movements carried meaning that words could not. He learned not to touch any plant without permission. He learned to wait for food and water rather than seeking it himself. He learned that the thornfolk watched everything he did and judged him not by his words, but by his actions. That on the 3rd day, a massive thornfolk entered his shelter. This one was ancient. Its bark was covered in moss and flowering vines. It moved slowly, each step careful and deliberate. The other thornfolk parted for it with obvious respect. Danny called it Old Root in his mind. Old Root stood over Danny for a long time, saying nothing, its amber eyes studying him with an intelligence that was impossible to deny. Then it reached down and placed one gnarled hand on Danny's chest, just like the first night in the forest. Feeling his heartbeat, Danny stayed perfectly still. He let the ancient creature examine him. He kept his breathing slow and his body relaxed. Old Root's bark shifted through several colors. Then it made a sound, low and long, like the groaning of a tree in wind. The other thorn folk in the settlement responded with similar sounds. A conversation Danny could not understand. When it finished, Old Root withdrew its hand. It looked at Danny one more time, then turned and left. Sprout rushed in a moment. Old Root was gone. The young one's colors were bright, almost excited. It made sounds and gestures that Danny could not fully understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Something had changed. Danny had passed some kind of test. That evening, the Thorn folk allowed him to leave the shelter for the first time. Sprout guided him through the settlement, showing him the shaped trees, the water sources, the places where food grew. Danny limped on his healing leg, taking everything in. The settlement was beautiful. The Thorn folk had not conquered their environment. They had grown with it. Every structure was alive. Every path was made of living roots. The forest was not just their home. It was part of them. Danny understood now why they killed anyone who harmed it. As night fell, he sat at the edge of the settlement with Sprout beside him. The bioluminescent flowers bloomed brighter in the darkness, creating a galaxy of soft light among the trees. Sprout touched Danny's hand briefly. A gesture of connection. Danny smiled. He was still trapped on an alien world with no way to contact the station. His crew probably thought he was dead. But sitting here in this impossible place, surrounded by beings that should have killed him, he felt something unexpected. He felt like he belonged. These were not monsters. They had never been monsters. They were simply people protecting their home. And somehow, they had accepted him as a guest. Bones filled the clearing like fallen leaves. Old Root had brought Danny here on his 7th day in the forest. The ancient thorn folk moved slowly through the remains, its bark shifting to dark colors that Danny now understood meant sorrow. Human bones, Brevian bones, Savine bones, dozens of skeletons scattered among rusted equipment, drilling tools, sample containers, cutting lasers, all the technology of the Galactic Survey abandoned among the dead. This was where every lost survey team had ended up. Old Root stopped beside a cluster of bones and made a long, low sound. Danny listened, watching the ancient creature's colors shift through patterns he was beginning to recognize. Grief, anger, and something else. Regret, maybe. Through gesture and color, Old Root told the story. The outsiders had come many seasons ago. At first, they stayed on the rocks and did not bother the forest. The Thornfolk watched, but did not act. Then the outsiders grew bold. They entered the trees. They cut and drilled and poisoned. They took things that did not belong to them. The Thornfolk had no choice. They defended their home. They killed the invaders. And then more came. And more. Always cutting. Always taking. Always forcing the Thornfolk to fight. Old Root's colors shifted to deep blue. It placed one hand on Danny's shoulder and looked at him with ancient eyes. Why are you different? Danny understood the question even without words. He thought carefully before answering through gesture and expression that he showed respect. He touched his chest, then gestured at the forest around them. He showed that he understood the forest was alive. He showed that he had not come to take. Old Root watched. Then the ancient creature did something unexpected. It showed Danny its memories, not literally, but through color and sound and movement. Old Root conveyed images that Danny could almost see. A young forest, thornfolk living in peace for thousands of years. The arrival of the first ships from the sky. Hope, then fear, then violence that never ended. The thornfolk had never wanted war. They had only wanted to survive. Danny felt tears on his face. He did not wipe them away. Old Root watched them fall with something like wonder, reaching out to touch the moisture with one thorned finger. Humans leaked water when they felt strongly. Another strange thing about the soft creatures. That night, Danny made a decision that he had to go back. The station would send more teams eventually. More cutting, more drilling, more death on both sides. Unless someone explained. Unless someone built a bridge, that he had to be that bridge. Sprout did not understand when Danny tried to explain. The young Thornfolk's colors shifted to gray, and its movements became small and sad. Danny had learned enough of their communication to recognize the emotion. Sprout did not want him to leave. Danny placed his hand over his heart, then pointed at Sprout, then at the forest around them. I will come back. I will not forget you. Sprout was still for a long moment. Then the young Thornfolk reached out and folded its thorns back, pressing its smooth palm against Danny's chest. The same gesture Old Root had made. Feeling his heartbeat, remembering it, that a promise. Old Root came at dawn. The ancient creature led Danny through tunnels of root that wound beneath the forest floor. They walked in darkness for what felt like hours, old roots bioluminescent patches providing the only light. Finally, Danny saw daylight ahead. The tunnel opened at the base of the eastern cliffs. He could see the survey platforms far above. Old Root stopped at the tunnel's edge and looked at Danny with those ancient amber eyes. "Tell them," the look said. "Make them understand," Danny nodded. He placed one hand over his heart. He stepped out of the forest and began the long climb up the cliffs. His leg ached but held. When he finally pulled himself over the edge and stood on solid rock, he heard shouting. The rescue team had spotted him. They came running with weapons drawn, certain he was being chased. But Danny stood alone at the cliff's edge, covered in dirt and plant matter, very much alive. Pelori reached him first. The old scout's feathered face showed an emotion Danny had never seen on him before. "Relief." "How?" Pelori whispered. Danny looked back at the forest below. Somewhere in that green darkness, Sprout was waiting. Old Root was watching. An entire civilization was hoping that this strange, soft creature could do what no one had done before. "They let me go," Danny said. "Because I listened. Because I respected them." He met Pelori's eyes. "They're not monsters. They never were. And I have to make the station understand that before anyone else dies." Pelori stared at him for a long moment. Then the old scout nodded slowly. "Then we have work to do." Silence filled the briefing room when Danny finished speaking. Supervisor Macaulay sat frozen at the head of the table. His four arms were crossed tight against his chest. His mandibles clicked in what Danny had learned was a sign of deep discomfort. "You expect me to believe," Macaulay said slowly, "that you lived among the Thorn folk for 8 days, that they healed your wounds, that they showed you their settlement, and that they simply let you leave." "Yes, impossible." Danny leaned forward. "I know it sounds impossible, but I'm standing here. I survived, and I am telling you the truth about why." Pelori spoke up from his seat near the wall. "I have watched the natives for 30 years. I have seen their attacks. They were never random. Danny's theory matches everything I have observed." "Hassa," the team medic nodded. "I examined him when he returned. The plant material on his leg had healing properties beyond anything in our databases. This is not something a mindless creature would do." Macaulay stood abruptly. "It does not matter. The Galactic Survey has invested billions in this operation. We are here to extract minerals, not to make friends with the local wildlife." "They are not wildlife," Danny said. "They are people." Before Macaulay could respond, the communication panel lit up. A hologram flickered to life at the center of the table. Regional Director Solon appeared, his gray Brevian features twisted in a cold smile. "I have been monitoring this discussion," Solon said. "Fascinating report, Mr. Reeves. You have provided us with valuable intelligence." Danny felt his stomach drop. Intelligence, settlement locations, communication patterns, social structure, weaknesses. Solon's smile widened. "With this information, we can finally pacify the native threat and expand operations into the forest. The mineral deposits, they're worth 100 times what we pull from the cliffs." "No." Danny stood so fast his chair fell backward. "That is not why I told you this. I told you so we can make peace. So we can find a way to work together. Peace does not generate profit, Mr. Reeves. They are intelligent beings. They have a civilization. You cannot just destroy them for money." Solon's expression hardened. "I can do whatever serves the interests of the Galactic Survey. And you will help me. You will provide detailed maps of the forest, locations of their settlements, and assessment of their combat capabilities." "I refuse." "Then you will face charges of insubordination, obstruction of corporate interests, and endangering survey operations." Solon leaned closer to the hologram pickup. "Your career will end. Your freedom will end. You will spend the rest of your life in a corporate detention facility. Do you understand?" Danny's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "They're my friends. I will not help you kill my friends." Solon stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Macaulay. "Supervisor, confine this man to quarters until the security team arrives. 3 days. Then we will resolve this situation permanently." The hologram vanished. Macaulay did not move. His four eyes shifted between Danny and the empty space where Solon had been. His mandibles clicked rapidly. "Supervisor," one of the guards said. "Your orders?" Pelori stepped forward before Macaulay could answer. The old scout stood beside Danny, his feathered hand resting on the human's shoulder. "I stand with him," Pelori said. "I have watched this forest for 30 years. I have watched us pour death into it and receive death in return." Danny found another way, the first other way, and I will not let corporate greed destroy that chance. Hassa stood next. "I have treated the wounds of every survivor who made it back from Thornfolk encounters. Every single one of them was injured because we provoked an attack. Danny is right. They defend themselves. Nothing more." Brill, the small nervous technician, stood last. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "I did not join the survey to commit genocide." Macaulay looked at them. "For people standing against the might of the Galactic Survey. For people choosing conscience over career." Slowly, the supervisor uncrossed his arms. He walked to the window and stared down at the green forest below. 3 days, he said quietly. "Solon's team arrives in 3 days." Danny moved to stand beside him. "Then we have 3 days to prevent a massacre." Macaulay was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "What do you need?" Danny looked at the forest. Somewhere down there, Sprout was waiting. Old Root was watching. An entire people were hoping that the soft creature they had trusted would keep his promise. "A shuttle," Danny said, "and witnesses. I'm going to show the galaxy that the Thornfolk want peace. And I'm going to make sure they get it." 20 soldiers stood at the cliff's edge with weapons drawn. Commander Grieve led them, a scarred Brevian veteran who had broken native resistance on a dozen worlds. He looked at Danny with contempt. "Step aside, human. We have authorization to pacify this territory." Danny did not move. Behind him, the treeline was filled with shadows. The Thornfolk had gathered, hundreds of them, watching in silence. Old Root stood at the forest's edge, ancient and patient. Sprout was somewhere in the crowd, thorns folded back in fear. Pelori stood at Danny's side. So did Hassa, Brill, and Macaulay. 5 people against 20 soldiers. Terrible odds, but they were not alone. "You do not understand what you are about to do," Danny said. "Look behind me. Look at them. They are not attacking. They are not threatening. They are watching because they want to know if peace is possible." Grieve laughed. "Peace? With things that have killed 63 survey personnel. Personnel who invaded their home. Personnel who cut their trees and poisoned their water and took without asking." Danny's voice rose. "Every death was a response to aggression. Ours, not theirs. And if you open fire today, you will prove them right. You will prove that outsiders can never be trusted." Grieve raised his weapon. "I have orders. Orders from a man sitting safely in orbit. Orders from someone who will never look into their eyes and see intelligence. See emotion. See hope." Danny pointed at the Thornfolk behind him. "They could have killed me when I fell into their forest. Instead, they healed me. They fed me. They taught me. They trusted me." He stepped forward. "And I will not betray that trust." Grieve's finger tightened on the trigger. The soldiers behind him shifted nervously. This was not what they had expected. They had come to fight monsters. Instead, they found a man willing to die for aliens that should have killed him. Then Old Root moved. The ancient Thornfolk stepped out of the forest. First time in history that a Thornfolk had voluntarily approached outsiders. Its bark shifted through colors that Danny had learned to read. Fear, hope, determination. The soldiers aimed at Old Root. Danny stepped between them. "Wait." Danny held up his hands. "It wants to communicate. It wants to try. After 40 years of death on both sides, it is offering us a chance to talk instead of fight. Do not waste this." Grieve stared at Old Root. The ancient creature was massive, covered in thorns that could kill a man in seconds, but made no aggressive move. It simply stood there, waiting. One of the soldiers lowered his weapon. Then another. Then a third. Grieve's arm trembled. His training screamed at him to fire. His orders demanded action. But something in Old Root's eyes stopped him. Something old and sad and desperately hopeful. "Commander," Pelori said softly, "this is history. Right now, this moment. You could be the one who started a war. Or you could be the one who stopped it. Grieve lowered his weapon. Negotiations lasted 6 hours. Danny translated as best he could, using gesture and color and the fragments of communication he had learned. Old Root conveyed the Thornfolk's terms. They wanted their forest protected. They wanted the outsiders to stop cutting and drilling and poisoning. In exchange, they would allow limited mining on the cliffs under strict protocols. That IT was not everything the survey wanted, but it was peace. When the agreement was reached, Grieve transmitted it directly to Galactic Survey headquarters, bypassing Solon entirely. The recording went public within hours. News networks across the galaxy picked up the story. The footage of Old Root stepping out of the forest became the most watched video of the year. Solon was removed from his position 3 days later. Criminal investigation pending. 6 months passed. Danny walked through the living settlement with Sprout beside him. The young Thornfolk had grown taller, its thorns more developed, but still rushed to meet Danny every time he visited. Their friendship had become something beautiful. Old Root waited in the Elder's circle. Its bark shifted to warm colors when Danny approached. They had developed better communication now. Not perfect, but enough. Danny had become the official liaison between the Galactic Survey and the Thornfolk. The first of his kind. He spent half his time on the station and half in the forest, building bridges that should have been built decades ago. The cliff mining continued under new rules. No drilling near root systems. No contamination of water sources. No expansion into the forest. The Thornfolk monitored everything and raised concerns through Danny when needed. It worked. Not perfectly, but worked. As Danny prepared to leave for the day, Sprout folded back its thorns and pressed one smooth palm against his chest. The gesture of connection. The gesture of trust. Danny placed his own hand over his heart. "Friends," he said. Sprout made a sound that might have been agreement. Old Root watched from the circle, its ancient eyes reflecting the bioluminescent light. The human had kept his promise. Against all odds, against all history, against everything that said it was impossible. The guide had warned, "Avoid the natives." The human had returned saying, "They're my new friends," and he had changed everything.